Good morning, this is Jay with dailytexture.com. This morning I am playing with one of my over 5,000 hummingbird photos I shot in the last couple weeks. And I had to really weed through these. I had a ton of bad ones, of course, but I also had several good ones. And I love to try to work with these little birds because they have a great sense of movement, especially the flying shots, which is what I was specifically after when photographing them this year, is the flying shots. And what I really like to do is work with textures with these guys that have movement, like these new abstract textures from in the Olive Garden series. The greens in this series are really suitable for the hummingbirds, in my opinion, because they have this olive green color that goes to a lime green when it hits the light, and iridescence. And so I thought I would work with one of these. I'm not sure. I like this one and I like this one. For these, they're the ones with the brighter green in them in this set. So I thought I would just try to do something with him to create a fun piece of art. And the original picture had the whole feeder in it, so I enlarged the picture a little bit to get, which I'm going to mask that out anyway, but to get that out of the screen and make him the focus. So I'm just going to mask away his background really quickly. And as always, I use a really big brush to get rid of most of the excess around the subject. And then as I get closer to the subject, I'll make the brush size smaller. And this is just a big, soft, round brush. I don't use any fancy brushes, just a round one. And I make sure it's soft, though, because if it's hard, it will leave too sharp of lines. So I'm just getting in as close as I can without going over him at this point. And I have the texture underneath, so I can kind of get an idea of what I'm going for here. And make the brush size a little smaller. Oops, went over the beak. Try that again. I love using these guys, any kind of subject in movement, with these abstract textures that I create. I love creating these. They're created on a full sheet of paper and then divided up to make the individual textures, so I can end up with a series. It's a lot of fun to do this kind of work in the studio, and then to translate it to being able to use it with photographs. And sitting out there in nature and trying to capture photos of birds and wildlife is just something I really enjoy. I honestly don't think I will ever stop doing it, even though I don't hunt the wildlife right now as much as I had in the past. I have wildlife like this right at home. Get around those little feet and around his belly. And I can see by my mask over here if I'm missing something. I'm going to try to get in here where this little feather is, in between those wings, and get a little closer around this beak. So I get as close as I can without going over the subject. But then later, I will go over the edges of the subject with a low opacity soft brush to bring the texture through the subject and to integrate the two together. Now I've got a pretty good start here, and I like to turn my layer on and off so I can see if anything's showing up. And I see a spot right here when I turn it off and back on. You can see a little flash. That's a little area right there I didn't get masked away. So I make the brush a little bigger and take care of that, and then I look around as I turn it on and off and see if there's any stray areas like right there that I may have missed. Okay, that's pretty good. Now I need to decide if I want to use this texture or the first one. This one's a little bit more busy, and of course I can always get on the texture layer and size it up to where I want it. I can also flip the texture layer around like so to determine if anything else might look interesting. But this texture is a little bit busier than the first one I pulled out. I think he stands out a little better with this one. Now let me play with this one as far as rotating it. Kind of like it the original direction, but I may want to resize it a little and bring more of that green in. So I resize it and move it. Maybe resize it back down just a little. Oh, now I've gone off the edge over here, so I need to move it back. That way he's tied in with a little bit of that green, which I kind of like. Let me get back on his layer. Turn that off and on. I see some flash of area right there when I turn it off and on. Like I didn't get all of his masking done in this section. I think he looks pretty good there. Now, I'm going to just on his layer play with his saturation, maybe boost it. That's a little too much. Just, you can go up really high and make it look really wild. But I just wanted to boost it a little bit on that saturation. And you can also play with color tones. Ooh, no thank you. Warm him up a little. Now the warming him up a little is kind of nice there. Just a tiny bit. This is just me nitpicking. I did turn his highlights down. He's got this bright highlighted spot right here. And I couldn't get the bright white totally turned down on this picture. So what I like to do, because then it was ruining the white everywhere else if I turned it all the way down, I like to go to a low opacity on my masking brush, really low, get a brush size and tap right in here, which will bring some of the texture through that area. And it kind of tones it down just a little because it's bringing the texture from behind into the white. And if I do it too much, I go back the other way with my mask and tone it back down just a little. But that kind of tones his highlight down just a tad and brings some interest because it's bringing some of the marks and the tone from behind in there. And you can kind of see it on the mask. It looks like a little ring around his neck where I've done that. But I also, at this point, since I have a low opacity masking brush, will go around the edges very gently and mask away his edges to basically soften them so there's no hard look on those edges, or not as hard of a look. Even though I use a soft brush when masking, there can still be a hard line with the difference between his colors and the backgrounds. So I like to go all the way around the edges and just soften those edges by masking them away to allow some of the texture to show through. And Hummingbird's wings are transparent, so you can actually, in this case, go over the wings just a little bit more to bring some of that texture through the wings and soften them a little bit, because if they were in front of this texture, they really would show it through their wings. Now that looks pretty good. Let me get some of his masking down here a little bit better. And I can also duplicate the texture layer then and put it on top and play with different layer modes. And I usually go a very low opacity, like around 30% when I'm doing this. But this also helps the texture integrate with the subject. So I've got multiply there, soft light, hard light. Now that looked kind of interesting to me. And then there's overlay. Those are my 4 favorites. I'm kind of liking hard light, and I will raise the opacity just to see. Of course, you can see it overlapping him now at a high opacity, and I don't want that, but maybe just a teeny bit to help things tie in. Usually around 20 to 30% is where I end up when I do this. And then you turn it off and on. That's off and that's on. And if, let me zoom in here. If any of it, like some of that is on his face when I turn it on, and it's softening it a little too much, I'm going to bring the opacity of it down just a little, maybe to about 14%, which is not as bad. And it brings some of the markings from the background in with him. This is all just to help integrate the two subjects together. I mean, the subject and the texture together. But I still think it's doing too much right here where his eye is. One thing I always keep in mind with my subjects is keep the eye clear. So I can, on the texture layer, just mask that area away where it put a little bit over his eye. And then I can turn it off and on, off and on. That's much better. Now let me raise the opacity of that up. If you raise it up real high, you can see the marks coming through from the texture. I don't want that. A little hint of a mark is okay, because it just brings them together. So maybe we'll stick with about 15%. This is just a minor thing that I like to do. It just gives it a little bit of a boost. I could also, if I wanted to, resize him up a little if I wanted him a little bit bigger. That's kind of interesting. That brings the green more closer. It brings the green from the texture closer to his green. I can move him around. I could flip him if I wanted. I could rotate him if I wanted. Well, that's kind of interesting, that pose right there. Maybe move him down just a little bit. And sometimes when you're moving your main subject around, you can see an area you may have missed masking. Like I saw right there, right then when I moved him. So if I turn it off and on, I can see that little flash right there where I missed some of his masking. And I also like to check all around the edges after I resize and move him to make sure there's nothing straggling from the original photo. So I just turn it off and on a bunch of times. I actually really like that right there. And I can go back to the hard light layer, play with opacity of that to see if I wanted to go a little higher. But no, I think I like it around that 14-15% range. And then I can merge these layers and be done. I could take his layer into a painting program if I wanted to. I prefer to do that earlier on, but I can do it after the fact if you have it in layers. Because I'm in Topaz Impression. I mean Topaz, the old Topaz, the really old Topaz. And I have Impression 1 and 2, so I could run one of those programs on him. But a lot of people don't have this program. It's not available anymore. So what I would suggest in that case is using, if you want to do a painterly look, either merging the layers, saving it out and running it through a paint program, or painting it completely over in Procreate, which is what I teach in my Skillshare classes. Something like that. Or you could run the subject only through a paint program to begin with before blending. There's just a lot of different ways you can go about it. But I do like the detail of the original photo paired with the painted background. That's just something that has always appealed to me, because it draws the eye, because people go, is that a photo? Is that a painting? Is that a photo? Is that a painting? And they will often call something like this a painting, even though this is not. This is a photo. But it just creates a really cool, unique look to have the differences between the two. So either way is fine, leaving it this way or taking it into a paint program. I kind of like him like this. I like the detail left in him. I do see a little area around his foot that now that I've moved him, you can see it. Let me zoom in. You see there's a little bit of lighter color there, and you turn that off and you turn it on. That's part of his background I didn't get rid of when I was masking. So let's go with a really small masking brush and just get in there and take those little bright areas out. Hummingbird feet are the most tedious thing. Oh, and there's a little hole right here between those toes that I didn't mask that out. And there's a little bright right there by the tail that I missed. Okay. I think I fine-tuned him enough now. Not that anybody would have ever noticed that except me, but if this does get printed big, and for some reason when I sell prints, people that buy them order big ones. I sell more big prints, like 30 inches and above, than I do small prints. Which is very interesting. But when something like that, with a little bit that I just fixed, when that is enlarged, that could be a little bit more noticeable, which is why I kind of zoom in and go around the edges and get a little picky about it, because I do happen to sell more big prints than I do small ones, and I don't want them to get a big print and say, oh, this looks tacky. I want it to totally look like the two have merged together the best way I can do it. And so I like to think about that and zoom in kind of close and look all around the edges to just make sure that I haven't missed something. And I'm going to look at the beak and turn it off and on. There's a little spot right there. I thought I saw that before, right outside the beak. And just trim that up a little bit. Now, and I could even go back this way. I'm going to lower the opacity in, because I went over his edges and softened him up, but I think I lost a little bit of detail right there when I did that. There we go. It's little. It's minute. It's me being nitpicky. Okay, I'm going to call him done at this point. No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that because I realized I did not denoise him. I shoot at a very high ISO to get the action shot. And so I'm going to, on his layer in this program, and this is something I should have done to start with before I ever even worked with the original photo. But you'll see the original photo here. And of course I've got it really zoomed in. Get down here. It's taking out some of those speckles. It's just a little minute thing. Of course, when he's super zoomed in, it looks blurry. But I hadn't done an example with this new set, and I was looking at it the other day. Well, I was looking at the Hummingbird photos because I had to go through over 5,000 photos, and I thought, these colors, they look so familiar. And then I realized, oh, those are the colors in the Olive Garden set. So that's why they were looking familiar. So I thought immediately, I need to blend some of my hummingbirds with some of the textures in this set. And I like to create little series, so I'll probably do maybe 4 of them with that set. So that way if somebody likes one and they wanted to create, order more for a wall series, then they would have the ability to do so. But if you only have one available, then and they really like that one, they won't have anything else to order. But of course, if you're not selling your work, you don't have to worry about that. But that's why I create the sets that I do in the series, because creating a series to me is important when selling. To have a few more available with the same look. This is still processing. There we go. And it's so subtle. I don't think anybody's even going to notice that, what I just did. So I'm going to merge these layers and save this guy. And then I will work on a couple of the other ones with the same texture set. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video and seeing how you can blend your subject with these fun abstract textures and create a unique and different look with your photos. You guys have a great day. Oh, and be sure to subscribe to my mailing list. I will put that link in the description below. And also, when you subscribe to the mailing list, you get some valuable coupons when shopping on the site. So be sure to subscribe to that. And thanks so much for watching. You guys have a great day.